Hello, and welcome back to the Morg. I am going strong with week 2, episode 2. I'm very proud of myself. If you've been around, you know, kind of have a hard time keeping up with shit. But as I am recording this, January 10th, our first episode goes live today, and I'm already recording my second episode, and I'm very, very excited. I guess now is a good time to kind of go into the weekly upload schedule. I will be uploading every Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's my goal, anyways. Also, it is snowing. It's our first snow day here in Tennessee, and it is absolutely gorgeous outside, y'all. I'm obsessed. This is the perfect time to be recording a little true crime episode for everyone. If you're new here, hi, I'm Morgan. I am your host here at the Morg. And this is going to be more of like a paranormal, true crime, cryptids, conspiracy theory podcast. So for 2025, I decided I kind of wanted to do one thing this year. I guess a little bit of a resolution or really just kind of a goal for myself. I don't do resolutions, if I'm being honest. But I wanted to kind of set a goal for myself to get back into doing something that I just enjoy. Genuinely enjoy. Every single thing that I do turns into a monetary value type thing. How can I make revenue out of it? And I'm just so over that mindset. Every aspect of my life outside of just my family has to do with money. And I'm getting rid of that energy for 2025. So that's what this is. I do my nails weekly. I keep up on these bad boys right here. And also this now. I want this to be something that I do weekly and just have a hobby. I know so many people are going to think that that is so strange to call true crime a hobby, but it is so interesting to me. Everything about it is interesting. If you don't know me, I am prior law enforcement. My goal joining law enforcement was to get into like a behavioral health unit. I'm really interested in criminal psychology, and that's kind of where all of this stems from. I really enjoy trying to figure out why people do the things that they do. So to me, researching and recording these and talking about it is a hobby for me, as weird as that sounds. So yeah, that's my goal for 2025. Hold me accountable. I cannot promise every single week, but I am going to do my best to do that all year. Every Friday, you could look for an episode and it should be there. If not, something will be posted on one of my socials. So just hold me accountable, please. And if you guys have any goals, let me know. Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss everything. Are you a resolution kind of person? I'm not. So this is weird for me, but I really want to know if you guys have any resolutions or goals for 2025. Now that my long intro is out of the way, let's get into today's cases. And yes, I said cases, so there are multiple. Disclaimer. All opinions in this video are mine and mine alone. I have scoured the internet for information and do my best to find accurate information, but cannot be held liable. I want to cover 3 cold cases that were solved in 2014 by the use of DNA and genealogy, something that I think has taken the world in true crime by storm since mid-2010s, I would say. Now, don't get me wrong, DNA fingerprinting, because yes, fingerprinting is the first form of DNA tracing, started in or around 1986. The first case that it was used in a trial was the Pitchfork murders in the UK. Police had wrongly convicted a man for the rape and murder of a woman and were able to use fingerprints to find the real perpetrator, and he then was arrested in 1987. So let's skip ahead a little bit to kind of the big points of DNA technology through the years, starting with 1986 being fingerprints. And then we're going to kind of skip ahead to 1994 in the US when CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, was made for a national DNA database. It consisted of fingerprints of convicted criminals, fingerprints found that were linked to unknown people from crime scenes, things of that nature. And that all kind of led to the early 2000s when DNA testing services like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe came out. It basically created a large pool of genetic data that could be tested for genetic investigations. Most notably, 2018, when the Golden State Killer was identified, all by using these public genealogy sites. Now, I am all about Ancestry, DNA, and 23andMe, if I'm being honest. I remember thinking when it first kind of came to my knowledge, thinking like this is going to be a huge thing for police. People are voluntarily giving up their DNA. And honestly, it is really cool. My mom was adopted when she was a kid, and she, I believe, was on Ancestry DNA, ended up finding a half sister of hers and all of this. So, I mean, I think it's really cool for people who are looking for that. Let's kind of talk about 2024 and the 5 cases that were solved using this database. We're going to bring it all the way back to February 9th, 1997. Esther Gonzalez was 17 years old and was walking to her sister's home in Banning, California. Banning was a very small town back then and about 80 miles inland from LA, about an hour away from where I grew up, actually. Esther, unfortunately, did not make it to her sister's that day, and by February 10th, an unidentified man called into the Riverside County Sheriff's Office to report a body being found in a snowpack off of a highway. The man claimed he couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman at that time. Of course, police responded and they were able to identify the body as 17-year-old Esther. They were able to piece together that Esther had been attacked, raped, and then bludgeoned to death. Now, the man who called in was identified later as Louis Randolph Randy Williamson. Police did state that the man seemed very argumentative when they were with him, which led them to think that that was kind of suspicious. Most people who find something of this nature, albeit probably very shocked, are not really going to be argumentative with police. They brought Lewis into the station, and of course, because this is the 80s, they asked him if he was willing to take a polygraph, and he agreed and passed with flying colors, is how it seems. I say that because they immediately stated that this cleared him of any wrongdoing. Yep, because that was the 80s, baby. 45 years later, November of 2024, they reopened the case and decided to take the DNA evidence and test it against forensic genealogy and identify that the murderer was, of course, none other than the man that found her, Louis Williamson. Louis had actually died in 2014 in Florida. It isn't really known what happened, but who cares? They ended up taking a blood sample at the time of his autopsy, which later was sent to the California Department of Justice and had the confirmation very shortly after. The blood sample had been tested against a semen sample found on Esther 45 years earlier. Esther's older sister, Elizabeth, who was 64 years old at this time in 2024, was reported saying, quote, "We are very happy that we finally have closure. We are happy about it, but since the guy has died, it's a little sad that he won't spend any time for her murder." Which is true and honestly probably very bittersweet for the family. Esther's older brother, Eddie, also went to Facebook to say the Gonzalez family would like to thank the Riverside County Sheriff's Department on a job well done. After 40 years, the family has closure. 45 years is so long to wait for it, but I am glad that some of the surviving family has that now. I mean, to think that from day one of finding her, they had a suspect, and it was that suspect. It's heartbreaking that it took that long, but I am glad that they have that now, and I'm glad that they seem to be okay with that scenario. I'm not going to say happy with it because no matter what, she still was brutally murdered. But you don't hear very often of a family thanking the sheriff's department after it had been so long. So I think that that's really amazing, and it kind of just shows like the Gonzalez family as a whole. Next, we're going to be going into another case that occurred kind of around the same time in Ada County, Indiana. I don't know if it's pronounced Ada. ADA, I don't know. Ada County is what I'm going to call it, Indiana. June 26, 1980, a highway crew found a body of a woman lying on an incline in a patch of long grass a few feet off of a pathway. The woman appeared to have multiple stab wounds and dried blood all over her. The police were able to quickly identify the 25-year-old as Mary Tracy. Mary had last been seen 2 days earlier on a well-known boulevard at that time. The boulevard, I guess, had a lot of bars and many nightclubs, and Mary had been in the middle of her marriage kind of falling apart and a lot of financial issues. I'm only stating that because since Mary seemed to have frequented the boulevard a lot of employees and workers in the area knew her. Police did, in fact, jump into action the first few days after the murder and started to hear rumors of a woman being killed at the Sunliner Motel. Management at that time, though, heavily denied that, but a maid at the same time told police that she did, in fact, clean up a lot of blood out of one of the rooms. Police were interested in this because they already had a reason to believe that Mary had actually been killed somewhere else and just dumped at that site due to the lack of blood found at the scene. And unfortunately, that was kind of that. They had ruled out her estranged husband because he actually had been in the hospital at that time. And behind some rumors and some he said, she said, the case went cold. They didn't have anything to go off of besides that one room, but the motel management said that nothing happened there. So I'm not really sure. I'm sure they investigated that, but it went cold until August 2023, when investigators decide to take another look. After looking through a huge case file that was honestly written about just being a complete disaster, they ended up sifting through everything and they turned to a man by the name of Charles Strain. There was a handwritten note stating that a jailhouse informant had stated that he saw his friend, Chuck, is what he referred to him as, at the Hi-Ho Club June 24th at 11. The informant straight up told police in a recorded interview Chuck told him that he had killed a girl by stabbing her and threw her in a ditch off of Highway 55, where Mary was found. How this Chuck guy wasn't investigated prior to this is beyond me. And of course, Charles had a pretty lengthy criminal history before the murder, mostly like thefts and things of that nature, but he also had a criminal history after the murder. In 1981, so a year later, he kidnapped his daughter and fled for 2.5 years. Y'all, he left the state and fled halfway across the country for 2.5 years. The only reason she was found was because somebody had seen her picture on a milk carton and ended up identifying her. Crazy. And then in 1986, he ended up being arrested and convicted for murdering his 16-year-old stepdaughter, Deanna Dean, who had been missing for 5 years at that point. So she went missing in 1981. So, little recap, in 1980, he potentially admitted to murdering Mary. In 1981, in the summer time frame, he kidnapped his daughter and then fled for 2.5 years. So I'm assuming sometime prior to fleeing for 2.5 years, he also murdered his stepdaughter. So when he was taken in for Deanna's murder, they did ask him about Mary, but he denied knowing her or knowing anything that had to do with the case. And I guess they just believed him. I'm not sure why, but they did. Unfortunately, again, Charles Strain died in prison in 2007. He ended up having a heart attack. I hope it was slow and painful, but anyways, again, a random string of luck. I don't know if they do this a lot. I'm not sure. I had never been to an autopsy while I was law enforcement, so I just don't know. But they had taken a blood sample at his autopsy in 2007, and they kept it. They ended up, once the case was reopened in 2023, they sent it off with the original rape kit done on Tracy, and boom, a match. The sheriff's office had officially closed that case. But I will say, they are still wanting more information in regards to it. This is what their press release had stated. Based upon these recent developments in our investigation, and given that our suspect is deceased, we are closing this case. Though Mary's case is now solved, we are still hoping to find some answers. We would like to talk to anyone who worked at the Sunliner Motel during the summer of 1980. We are also attempting to locate a friend of Mary's, known only as Lisa, who may have been one of the last people to see her alive. If you have any information about Mary's case, please call 208-577-3102 or email Deputy L. Montag at adacounty.id.gov. Obviously, I will link all of that information below as well. So if you have any information, please give them a call. And then for case number 3, I'm going to be talking about the murder of Leila Johnston. Leila was 68 years old, and in the May of 1976, she was found in her home deceased by a neighbor. Honestly, they had no leads at this time. Police could tell that someone had broken into Leila's home that night, raped her, and then strangled her to death. But there really isn't much noted on the investigation after that. Between 1976, the next notable thing that was released was in 2004. They were able to take some evidence and make a DNA profile of the suspect. They entered it into CODIS and nothing. So the case fell right back into the cold case files until May of 2023, where investigators were able to reapply the DNA evidence and test it against the DNA Lab's international system. That is, I guess, what it's called. I believe it goes by DLI. That is where your public DNA is stored when you do one of those genealogy site things. Doing this led police to find a match to a family tree of the killer. Not exactly the killer, but somebody in his lineage. It took about a year to figure out who exactly this could be, but they did. Charles Droke. And guess what? Again, Charles Droke had actually been murdered himself 13 years after he murdered Leila by his own brother. His brother had recently been released from prison, I guess, and I think it's safe to assume didn't like him very much. And that's that on karma. That is that on karma. It took 48 years, but closure also came in some part to Leila's family. Leila's granddaughter stated, quote, "I thought it would never be finished. It had just been so long." So yeah, that's 3 cold cases that were closed by DNA and genealogy testing in 2024. And let me just say, I am so grateful for this. I can't even imagine having one of my loved ones murdered and going almost 50 years not knowing, and then getting that little shred of hope back. I don't want to say hope, but closure. it really could be looked at like just like that. It's closure. They got some closure in their loved ones' deaths, and that is amazing. I do hope that this gives people hope for their murdered loved ones' cases. You just don't know what could happen. And I'm so thankful that these systems and testing sites and everything have updated so much for investigations. I also wanted to mention during my research a little bit of a lighter note that in 2024 was the third year in a row that homicide rates in the US have declined. They haven't been this low since 2019. And I'd like to think maybe the way of new testing and the way that we are starting to run investigations has helped. People know how high the odds are to be caught now. I mean, you can leave your DNA by brushing up on a wall. Is it going to be the most clear DNA? No, but now with what we have, it's insane to think that you are going to get away with it anymore. I mean, down to your phone, you are going to be able to be tracked. Nothing is ever deleted forever. If you get one little drop of snot somewhere and they find it, there you go. That's it. And honestly, I hope that every single one of these people who've committed murders over the last 50 years and haven't been caught get caught soon. I'd love to never hear of another case going cold again. Do I think that it's going to skyrocket solved cases? Absolutely. Do I think that there's still room for technicalities? Of course, that's what defense attorneys are for. But we can always hope. We can always hope. Don't give up on holding out hope for your loved ones. So that was today's episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope you liked this. A little less in-depth on all the info, but I'm giving you a little bit more cases, and I know that this was kind of a short one, but I am so excited to just be getting back into it and everything, and I hope you enjoy knowing that we solved cases last year ranging from 40 to 50 years old. Cold cases solved. Also, let me know what else you want to hear about, cases, topics, ghost stories, you name it. Send me an email and you can get a shout out if I pick your case. I also do have a jot form link linked down below that you can put in all of your information or any of the information you have on a case or a ghost story or a story that you went through. Maybe you had a case that you want me to talk about. So go ahead, fill out the jot form. You can always be anonymous. If you don't want to apply your name, you don't have to. I promise you. But if you do, I'll give you a little shout out. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do whatever it is you're supposed to do wherever you're listening. And thanks for coming back to the morgue. Bye.